Okay, this is my 1956 Thunderbird. I bought it from a guy here in Plant City who bought it from a guy in New York, Long Island, New York. The car raced from 1961 up until the late 60s. It was been a drag racer forever. It was parked in the late 60s, set in a building, and when I got it, it was a real piece of junk. The front end is fiberglass, then it's steel from here back. Car originally, when I got it, had fiberglass fenders, but they were beat up and terrible. So we got these repo fenders that are available all over. The car runs a 720, is the best time I've ever run. The slowest I've ever run is a 9-second, 8th mile. I miss second gear. We're working on the shifter to make it work where I don't miss second gear anymore. This was the color combination when I got it. It was green, a different color green, and a gold top, so we stayed with it. It ran as a B-gasser, and it ran a 427 in it with 2 4s, a tunnel rack. The car runs good. I have no problems with it. The backtrack racing is what we did because it's back to the track racing, and I put it on all my cars. The guy that owned the car originally called it RODAN because in the late 60s, early 60s, there was a Japanese movie with a giant bird called Rodan. So that's the reason he did that. He also, the lettering, you can see how it is. He had on the front fender, it was painted on a big Home of the Monsters like this. Well, I kind of like that, so rather than taking the whole fender, I put it down on the bottom, and then I put it on most all the other cars. So the car is a very nice car. The roll bar in it is not exceptional, but it was in it from the 60s. And the original seat is in it, and it is extremely heavy. I've thought a few times about taking it out, but it's just part of the car, so I'll leave it in. The gauges, we moved the tach where the speedometer was and put the oil pressure and water temperature in the other holes. So when I got the car, it had aluminum inner panels. They were beat up. When we cut them out, took them out, and then I built new panels. An engine turned the inside of the car. I did it randomly just to have a older look to it. And basically that's the car. This is the last car that I will get rid of. This is my favorite car. I like the lines on it and everything about it. It's what it should be. Okay, we're on the underside of the Thunderbird. I'm getting ready to go this weekend over to Orlando and race, so I'm changing the oil in it. I've got to work on the shifter, but I'll show you what we did and what was done prior to me. And starting at the beginning of the car, they used to what they call flat tow these cars. They would just hook a tow bar onto this right here and hook it up to the back of the trailer, truck, car, whatever they were using, and pull it to the races. They had no trailers. This was common. I used to strap them down now. You come on under the front end, and we put a new straight axle under it. This is out of a 64 Ford truck. And what we did, we cut it in the middle and we took 4 inches out of this, put it together and welded it up. That way it fit under the car. We also added, for safety reason, disc brakes to it. It was simpler than drums, and that worked out real well too. Up on the top here, this cross member keeps the car together, and it was originally the motor mount fit right up here for the 292 312. Well, we mocked the car up, and we had a block with no oil pan on it, so when we put it in, everything worked. Well, then when we put this motor in, we found that this was hitting the oil pan, so we had to cut this loose and swing it forward. And then the other thing, the oil filter hit right over here, and we had to grind down this cross member to make it work. If we'd have known this was going to happen, I would have did it all. I would have cut it loose and moved it forward, and we'd had no problem. Or Ford makes a rear sump oil pan, and the sump would have been back here, and that would have made it a lot easier. But you live and learn. Another thing that we had a problem with, these motor mounts were, this car was built in '61 as a drag racer, so they had, this is called a C motor mount, and they used them on the big block Fords, the FEs. Well, I didn't know that, so we put a regular motor mount in it, and the motor just dropped in, set too low. So then I had to research it, and they only built these 1 or 2 years in '61 and '62, I think's what it was. So that was a kind of a pain in the neck. Run into some problems, no big deal. We came back, we put 67 Mustang headers on it, and we only had to cut it here and up there and move this pipe and one other pipe right here, and that was it. Everything else fit in it perfect. This side, no problem at all. It worked terrific.
What motor is in it, Fred?
It has a 406, which is an FE motor with 3 2s on it, tri-power. It's the fastest time I've ever run was a 7/28 of a mile, which is equivalent, they tell me, to an 11/20. Car handles well. We have no problems with it. The suspension works great in it. Now you move on back, we run tailpipes on it. Well, the transmission mount we built, and the original car, the original 55, 6, and 7 Thunderbird had what they called an X-frame. It ran from right here over to here, and then the same thing here. So, and the X-frame was huge, so we cut it all out and just built a transmission mount in it, and it worked well. There was one here, but not this one. So that was no problem, but the frame itself is plenty heavy to hold the car up. We got a reverse valve body C6 in it, and that's a Ford transmission. And what reverse valve body, instead of shifting forward to shift the gears, you start in low in the middle and pull back. That way you don't go into neutral or reverse. So that's the reason they call it a reverse valve body. The shifter is a B&M cable shifter. That's one of the reasons I got it up here. I missed second gear, so we got to readjust this. This drive shaft loop, I would like to take credit for it, but it was built into the car as the traction bar mounts were too when I got it. This car came from the worst work in the world to some of the really neat work, so it had different people over the years work on it. Coming on back, we decided to, I had it laying out, take the 9-inch Ford. This is one of the only modifications we did to it. Take the 9-inch Ford out and put this Franklin quick change. It's called a Super Comp quick change. It's used on, was used, I believe they used them on NASCARs, if not NASCARs, ARCA cars. And a quick change, what it does, you can pull the back case off and change 2 gears, and you can go from a 410 to a 270, or you can go from a 513 to a 410 just by changing the gears, moving it around. That's the reason they call them quick change. So the quick change that does that. What the original car, it had the airbags on it like this because that was the technology of the day. They used a big coil spring, put the airbag in it, and that way when you take off the car, the rear end goes up against the airbags, and you can adjust any pressure you want on this. And you also got the shocks in it, but that gives you your momentum up where the car don't bounce. We got a track bar here that keeps the rear end from moving sideways, and that was a little bit of engineering to put it in. They had a 9-inch, and it worked out a lot easier, but we went the hard way and put this thing in. Coming on back to the back is the wheelie bars, and we run them like this to take it in and out of the trailer if we want to run, which right now this car won't pick the front end up. Well, we drop these down where when it goes up, it catches on the wheelie bars. The original car had the wheelie bars on it, and they were used. They were kind of crude, but it worked. So that's the back end of the car. When we got the car, this is the best place to see this. This was all rusted out. We cut it off right here across this, built this panel and rolled it under and welded it in, then cut the corners in a pie shape and built this in here, the corners like this. Kind of a different look. Most people don't even see it. Another thing, when I got the car on the back, it was the same lettering, but it said Red's car in tow. So I just put Fred's car in tow. I figured that would work. So what we're going to do is let the car down now, and then we'll go over the top part. This is the engine compartment of the Thunderbird. This is a 406 3.2s tri-power. When I got it, this car took me longer to restore than any car I've ever had. This one took me about 2.5 years because I would get burnt out on it. It was such bad shape. It had been hit right over here in this corner and drove the A-pillar and everything back, so we had to pull it out and get it back into shape. Well, when we pulled it out, Thunderbird, the front fenders on it are molded into the body, so it's not just taking the fenders off, you have to cut the fenders off. Well, this had fiberglass fenders on it, and they had done it, the front end completely different than the way we did it. So what we did was take the fiberglass fenders, which you could still buy, and I had to buy them new, not new, used new. The hood is new on it. The front bumper is fiberglass also. When Ford was building the Thunderbirds, after they built the 55, 6, and 7, a couple of years later, they quit stamping parts out for them. So what they would do is sell fiberglass parts and have them put on the car, and that was standard operational procedure. And so there are plenty of fiberglass parts out there for the front end of these cars. We cut it down at the bottom, made it where it would fit in. It fits very nicely. It's very light compared to the other front end. And we also straightened up the firewall. The firewall was riddled with holes in it. We went in, and this took us about 2 weeks to weld, sand the firewall down. This is where the heater went. We took it out and welded in a plate and then put the motor in. One of the things that turned into a problem was making it turn, steering. So this was a little bit of an engineering feat here on the front of it. We took the Ford axle and we turned it around backwards because you can see there's not much room in here. And if we would have left it with the way it was in the Ford with the drag link in the back, we would have had to come from right here, come straight down almost, and go in that way to get the steering. So what we did was turn it around and put the steering box right up here in the front. And then we had almost a straight line. We built this in. Then we came out the side, went in here, and it pulls from the front. We built this tiller arm here and put on. That way it made it so much simpler. So we built a couple cars with straight axles after that with a Ford front end in it, and that's what we do now, is turn them around backwards. So it works so much easier. We covered up a lot of things, and if you're not a Thunderbird guy, you don't see it. But the hinges, we covered them up where you could see them. We covered up the whole front end here. The car is completely changed. We took the windshield wipers out of it and just completely changed everything around on the front end, covering up what we thought was ugly.